otherwise, it's just a lot going on. So I want to do something, take a little personal point of privilege, if y'all will, and let's just take 30 seconds. Everybody just sort of, find that space in your heart, whatever it is, hold that space. If you've got something going on that you want the brothers to be sort of intentional about for you, or if not, then you hold that heart space for somebody else. So let's just take 30 seconds of just some quiet. All right, thank you, brothers. I appreciate that. I remember in seminary when we were doing our internships for community ministry, our professor was an Episcopalian priest, and she taught us. She said, every time we start class, let's start with 5 minutes of silence, and we would just sit in silence for 5 minutes. She said, because if you're going to be in ministry, you have to get used to the idea that sometimes people are going to bring something to you and there are no words, right? There's nothing you can say. You may want to jump in and solve it, but sometimes all you can do, the best thing you can do is just sit with folks. And so, like I said, I appreciate that. If nobody else needed it, I needed that 30 seconds. All right. All right. So the reflection for today is it's hard, but it's fair. If they really knew the truth, why would they tell you? I'm going to come out of the book of Brother Gil, which y'all know I am wont to do. All right, so this is from Gil Scott Heron's Message to the Messengers in 1994. He basically made a song as a message to the rappers who oftentimes give him credit for being their inspiration. So he said, be sure you know the real deal about past situations and ain't just repeating what you heard on a local TV station. Sometimes they tell lies and put them in a truthful disguise. But the truth is, that's why we said it wouldn't be televised. They don't know what to say to our young folks, but they know that you do. And if they really knew the truth, then why would they tell you? If they knew the truth, why would they tell you? It's hard, but it's fair. That's a statement that's etched in my brain because my dad said that all the time, not only when I was growing up, but even toward, in the last years, toward the end of his life. And I always got that, sort of it's hard part, but the other part never made sense to me. It's hard, but it's fair. There's so much in life that's just not fair. So how could that statement ever really make sense? But then, eventually as I got older and frankly, after my dad passed, thinking about that a lot, had an epiphany. This concept of what's fair versus unfair. And I think, and it reminded me of something I learned years ago, that the emotion that we associate with an event is based on what we expected versus how we actually experienced that event. So if you were expecting a steak and somebody gave you a cheeseburger, you might be disappointed in that, right? Might be nothing wrong with a cheeseburger, might be a phenomenal, great cheeseburger, but that's not what you were expecting. You were expecting a steak. So that you would have some disappointment there. And just holding that example in mind, the epiphany that I had around what's fair versus not fair is that we judge the situation as unfair because what we experienced was not what we expected. And maybe fairness, as I was thinking about it, is actually a lot more complicated than what meets the eye. And I got a story I want to share with you guys. You guys will be used to the fact that some of my stories from growing up in Rochester are a little bit off center, so to speak. So, all right. About fifth grade, there are a couple older boys in my school, maybe seventh, eighth grade, and they have beef with each other. They decide they're going to settle this beef one day after school. And so the two boys show up to the corner where they're supposed to settle this beef. There's a black kid and a white kid. The black kid actually has a crowbar, a tire iron, if you will, in his hand. And so he shows up. The white kid says, man, what you doing with that crowbar? are you so much of a coward that you are afraid to fight me fair, right? So the black boy is now, all in his feelings. His pride's all swollen up, and he's like, "Well, I'm not a coward. I'm not gonna let somebody call me a coward." No, he's defending his honor, so to speak. So he takes a crowbar and throws it down. I'll fight you, right? So I guess I probably don't even need to tell you all the rest of the story, right? White boy picks the crowbar up, busts the black boy in the head with the crowbar. I haven't seen that kid in 30 plus years, but when I last saw him, he still had a lump on the side of his head. And so here it is. This black boy is thinking the situation's one thing. This is about honor, and it's actually not. Sometimes they tell lies and put them in a truthful disguise. The white kid knew what historians have known all along: life is competition, and the only people interested in a fair fight are those with no access to weapons. It's hard, but it's fair. It's fair not because it falls into any category of explicitly agreed upon rules and norms. It's fair because it is within the bounds of the real rules by which those with power are really playing. We've all heard that it's all fair in love and war. Trust me, this ain't love. And for obvious reasons, nobody told us it was war. If they really knew the truth, why would they tell you? So when my dad said it's hard, but it's fair, he didn't mean that it's fair in the way that we've been taught to think about and expect fairness. It's fair because that's the way it is, and we shouldn't expect anything different. Now, interestingly enough, along the way of my epiphany about what fairness means and what it doesn't mean, I'm also reminded of another story from around that same time. So specifically, this is in sixth grade now. And so where I went to school, we had two boys basketball teams, fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, and seventh and eighth grade. And the fourth, fifth, and sixth grade level, which I was at the time, you could not play defense before the half court line. So there was no full court press, right? So so you couldn't run a full court press. But at the seventh and eighth grade levels, you could actually, that's when you were allowed to start running the full court press. And here's why I'm bringing that up over 30 years later, right? There's something I experienced in sixth grade that I think we could all benefit from today, as well as teach our children. Once we got to about mid-season of our sixth grade basketball year, we started carving out time in practice every day to work a few minutes a day on how to handle a full court press. We scrimmaged against the older boys who were already running the press. We diagrammed out a full court press on a chalkboard. Our coaches had us go through drills at walking speed. We would literally walk through breaking a full court press. So guess what? By the time I got into seventh grade and I played point guard back then, I ran into a full court press, and it was no big deal. I wasn't shook. I wasn't surprised or scared. I was well prepared. Here's the thing, though, to be clear, even when you're well prepared and expecting it, bringing the ball up court against the full court. Hold on a second. Sorry. Oh, come on, baby. You're shaking the camera. Sorry. That's what we do. All right. So to be clear, even when you're well prepared and expecting it, bringing the ball up court against a full court press is still hard, but it's fair. Whether you know that's allowed in the rule book or not, it's fair. Whether you've practiced for it or not, it's fair. Whether you choose to run the full court press when it's your turn to play defense, whether you do or not, it's still fair. And here's the good news. My dad had another saying when life would throw us the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. My dad would say, that's a small thing to a giant. That's a small thing to a giant. Brothers, each of you is a giant. I am a giant. We are giants. Unfortunately, however, even giants play small every now and then. Even intellectual geniuses once in a while get hoodwinked, bamboozled, and led astray. From time to time, even great brilliance gets dimmed. And in my research on Black boys and trauma, we eventually begin to internalize the way we've been treated. And if we aren't careful, those once in a while blips can cause us to forget just how powerful we really are. When I really think about it, that might be my only job on these Sunday morning sessions, to remind each and every one of us that we are giants. I'm not talking about race superiority here. I'm talking about the resilience of the human spirit. No matter how much we put people through, when you look back on the 400 years of the history of Black people in this country, to have just survived what we've been through is a testament to how strong we must be. But of course, the powers that are at war with our prosperity don't want us to spend too much time thinking about our history. And that's why Brother Gill told us, be sure you know the real deal about past situations and ain't just repeating what you heard on a local TV station or what you learned in somebody's history class or even Sunday school class. It was actually putting a full court press on your young, impressionable mind. Be sure you know the real deal about past situations and ain't just repeating what you heard on a local TV station. Sometimes they tell lies and put them in a truthful disguise. Sometimes they convince us that the power we possess is wrong and convince us to discount and abandon our power, our beauty, our brilliance. And the next thing you know, they've taken the power that we discarded and they're beating us over the head with our own power. Sometimes they tell lies and put them in a truthful disguise. But the truth is, that's why Brother Gill told us it wasn't going to be televised. Now, as is our custom, as we end our weekly reflection, I ask that you all would join me in this intention for our time together. And let's do it responsibility if y'all agree. Let us be intentional that our broga practice might be a living metaphor for our life practice. And so it is our intention. Let us be intentional that as we work through our practice, our stretches, our breathing, our poses, let us be intentional about graciously accepting that there may be some pieces to the session today that are not available to us in our practice at this moment. And whatever disappointment we feel that we are not stronger and more flexible, let us be intentional about using that frustration to fuel our commitment and drive to be better at yoga as well as in life. And so it is our intention. Let us be intentional to keep our eyes open, our minds focused, and our hearts clear so that we might notice when the world's definition of fair doesn't seem to be in alignment with ours. And when our expectations don't match our experience, let us be intentional about reevaluating our expectations of the situation until we are in a position to change our experience of that situation. And so it is
our intention.
Finally, brothers, let us be intentional that while we do not deny the pain that we feel, let us never forget that whatever full court press life puts on us, whether random or the result of someone's malicious intent, that full court press pales in comparison to the strength and power of the generations that courses through us. No matter what happens, let us be intentional that we will always show up in the world as the giants that we are. And so it is our intention. We pray these and all things in the names of both our ancestors and our unborn grandchildren. Amen, Ashe, Namaste, and so it is.
So it is.
So it is our intention.